Hey everyone, how's it going? So this is a continuation from the last video where I talked about how when we move one note down a half step from a fully diminished seventh chord, we get a dominant 7. So there's C fully diminished 7, and there's B dominant 7, right? So we know that from a diminished seventh chord, we get a dominant seventh chord. But it doesn't end there. We can actually get more chords just by moving one or two voices the distance of a half step. So we know what happens when we move a note down a half step, but what would happen if we move a note up a half step from a fully diminished 7? So let's say I play my diminished 7 and I move this C up a half step to C sharp. Let's hear what it sounds like. And that type of chord is just an inversion of what we call a half-diminished seventh chord. This is also known more commonly to jazz players as a minor 7 flat 5 chord. So if I move one note up a half step, that's an inversion of E flat half diminished, or E flat minor 7 flat 5. We've got a fully diminished triad plus a minor 7. So we know that when we raise a note a half step in a fully diminished 7, we get a half diminished chord. Alright, so what else can happen? Let's say instead of moving one note down a half step to get a dominant, what would happen if we moved two notes right next to each other down a half step? Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to move the C and E flat from my C fully diminished 7 down a half step. So let's see what that looks like. And the type of chord quality we get here is known as a minor 7th chord, which is made up of a minor triad plus a minor 7. And how I got there was I moved two consecutive or two notes right next to each other in the diminished 7, and I moved them down a half step. There we go. So what would happen if I took two consecutive notes but moved them up a half step? So let's see what happens there. So I'll move my C and E flat up a half step. And here we get an inversion of another minor 7th chord. That's F sharp minor 7. There's my minor triad, and here's my minor 7, right? So what we learn from this is if we take two consecutive notes and lower them or raise them, then we get two different kinds of minor 7th chords, which is particularly interesting. What about if I took two non-consecutive notes and I raised or lowered them? So in other words, what if I took from my C fully diminished 7, if I took my C and F sharp and lowered them a half step? Let's see what happens there. Now this chord might look a little bit funny or confusing to some of you, but all this is, it's a dominant 7 but with a flat 5. So this is really just B7, B dominant 7 but with a flat 5. There you go. What would happen if I took those two same notes, C and F sharp, and I raised them a half step? Let's see what that looks like. This is an inversion of another dominant 7 flat 5 chord. It's E flat dominant 7 flat 5. There you go. We've got, that's what E flat dominant 7 would be if it was a normal dominant 7, but this chord has that flat 5. So why am I showing you all these things? We can relate almost everything, almost all the chords we'll ever need in music, or at least playing jazz, stem from a fully diminished 7 in some way, shape, or form. So it's really important to notice that because these chords come from a diminished 7, we can explain where they come from. And I feel like if we can explain where certain things come from, then we have a greater handle on what they actually mean for us when we go to improvise or to play music, or even when we're just thinking about music. So that's what we get from fully diminished seventh chords in continuation from the last video. We know we get dominant seventh chords by lowering one note a half step. We get half-diminished seventh chords by raising a note a half step. We get minor seventh chords by raising or lowering two consecutive notes a half step. There's one minor seven, and there's another minor seven. And then lastly, we get a dominant seven with a flat five if we take two non-consecutive notes, or notes that are not right next to each other in the diminished, and we raise or lower them a half step. That's B dominant 7 flat 5, and that's E flat dominant 7 flat 5. And just as a quick tip, one interesting thing to note about a dominant 7 flat 5 is if I play B dominant 7 flat 5, that's exactly the same as the dominant 7 flat 5 a tritone away. So a tritone away from B is F, and if I play an F dominant 7 flat 5, it's the exact same four notes: F, A, B natural, and E flat. F, A, B natural, and E flat. It's kind of interesting. So if you know 6 of them, then you really know all 12. So that concludes today's lesson on the rest of chord qualities that we get from diminished chords. Thanks for watching.